Hi, I'm Stephen Shank. And this is the One More Thing podcast, a chance for us to expand on those teachings and answer your questions. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and you stay sunny, Suncoast.
So this past weekend, you spoke on personal responsibility, which is a topic you're extremely passionate about. So let's recap a little bit of what you spoke about this weekend and kind of how you want to expand on that idea.
Well, we started with Genesis 3, the story of Adam and Eve, where they were not supposed to eat from only one tree in the garden, and they did. And as soon as they did, the serpent deceived Eve, and Eve gave to Adam. So the excuses were, hey, it's not my fault. The serpent deceived me. Hey, it's not my fault. The woman that you gave me, which also he not only blames the woman, but also blames God a little bit. There's the problem, is when someone else does not take responsibility for their life, or when I begin to blame others for the decisions that I make and I choose to make, then I'm in a place where I've lost the possibility of correction. So I think it's important for people, and this is my own pet peeve. I think it's important for people to say, I own it.
Right.
I made a mistake. I got pulled over by a police officer one day coming through Venice 10 years ago. And I'd been on the interstate coming from Miami, went through Venice, got back on 681, which is like an interstate type road, and went over the hill. I was talking to Becky, wasn't paying attention. I was doing 60, low 60s, and I think it was 50. It was about 10 over. If it's 50, I was going 60. If it's 55, I was going 65. And the guy saw me, and I looked up. I said, up, and he's pointing me over. I just pulled right over and stopped. And he came over and said, well, what's your hurry? I said, I'm really not in a hurry. So why are you speeding? I said, I wasn't paying attention. And I'm owning it. Right. I mean, that's the honest thing. I wasn't paying attention. And he did not like that at all. And he really didn't know what to say. He was like, well, you need to pay more attention. I said, okay. I'm sorry. I guess I should. But in my mind, I was saying, just write the ticket and leave me alone.
Well, so I'm sure as a police officer, he was usually, people have this reason why they were speeding. Oh, I'm late for work, or I have this, I have that. And, please, I'm so sorry. And you were just owning the fact that you weren't paying attention and just threw him for a loop, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Now, I have to confess, too, when I was a young teenager, I had more tickets than the average person, by far. And I made up every excuse in the world, by far. Whatever you can think of, I lied about it and tried to get out of these tickets. I never did. So some point in my maturity, I decided I'm going to tell the truth. Even if I get pulled over, I'll pay the fine. I'll go to the class, whatever, but I'm not going to compound my issues by lying about it. If I'm in a hurry, I'll say, hey, I was in a hurry. But whatever I'm going to try to be is, I don't want to tell him all my faults, but at least in that circumstance, I was willing to say I wasn't paying attention. He didn't like it, but I like it when people own it.
Right.
Because when I own it, then all of a sudden the problem's not me. If I say, well, Becky was talking to me, it's her fault, she was distracting me, well, then what I really need to do, officer, if you can fix her, write her the ticket, then that'd be even better. But that doesn't help me at all when I say, hey, it's my fault. I own it, and I'll pay for it. And trust me, when you write that check or whatever you do, there's a correction there that you begin to learn from. I've got lots of stories of people who they play the blame game, cast it off, but I like it when people own it. Sure. There's another story that I didn't mention this weekend I think is appropriate. It's a story of King David, about 1000 BC. And you may know the story. He looked across the wall of his palace, and he saw this beautiful lady, Bathsheba. And even though she was married to a guy, Uriah, he went and called her over, and he slept with her, and she became pregnant and had a son. During this process, he sent Uriah, brought him home. He wouldn't sleep with his wife. He finally sent him to the front line, really had him killed. Yeah. So they had a baby in about 1 year, having a party or get-together. And Nathan, the prophet, comes to talk to David. He said, David, let me tell you a story. There's a man who had significant wealth, lots of cattle, lots of flocks of sheep, and just extremely wealthy. And his neighbor was a poor guy who only had one prize lamb. So when he decided to have a party, instead of taking one of his many sheep or cattle, he decided to take the prize lamb from the neighbor. He slaughtered it and killed it, and they had a feast. And he said, what do you think, David? What should be done? David said, that guy should be punished. That's just not right. He was outraged that someone that had so much wealth would exploit a poor neighbor. He said, "Who is this?" He said, "Well, David, it's you. You're the one that took Uriah's only wife. He was a poor guy. You took what was his and you made it yours." And David owned it. And you hear a lot of the Psalms where David is crying out to God in his despair. I've sinned. I've done wrong.
Right.
And it doesn't correct it, but there is the possibility of correction when someone owns it.
And I love stories like that in the Bible that David was called a man after God's own heart.
Right.
And he's clearly a flawed human being and makes massively devastating mistakes, but he's still, pursuing this idea of God and wanting his heart to be more like his. And it's a really interesting story. And you open up this series or this sermon this weekend with talking about nihilism. What is the correlation between nihilism and a lack of personal responsibility?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, nihilism basically means that life has no meaning. Just live for today. That nothing really matters. People come and go. Life is not precious. You're just going to exist, so do whatever you can to get by. Or if you want to end your life sooner, you can, because it doesn't have any merit. I think taking personal responsibility simply says it has some precursors. Life is precious. It has value, and we proclaim that as Suncoast. And we don't think that people are just these horrible, horrific human beings. We're all God's kids on the way to becoming better. I think taking personal responsibility simply helps me to allow God to correct the things in my life. And you say, well, what does that look like? Well, maybe when I speak out and I should not, or maybe when I'm silent and I should speak forth, that when we have a few moments of reflection and we take responsibility, we think our life can be more full, can have more value, and can have more meaning, as opposed to nihilism where nothing really matters.
Yeah, what's the point?
What's the point of why correct me? Why correct others? Let me just die sooner and end this pitiful existence.
Well, I think the beauty of taking personal responsibility, it has this way of not just affecting your own life, but the people around you. And hopefully that has this ripple effect throughout it all. I know it's a personal responsibility, or taking personal responsibility is one of our core values here at Suncoast.
Right.
So obviously you put a lot of weight on this idea. It gives a lot of meaning to life to do that. What are some of the byproducts of taking personal responsibility?
Well, I think it's personal growth comes out of personal responsibility. If I'm always playing the blame game, let's just talk about with God. Oh, God, I blame you for the fact that, you did not let me win the lottery, or as Adam did, it was the woman you gave me, God. It's your problem.
It's almost like he blamed God. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I think part of it's this deflection. I think that when we have reflection and realize I need to quit deflecting all the correction that's available in my life. If I'm going to become the best possible version of me that I can be, I have to take responsibility and quit blaming God and quit blaming my wife. I mean, Becky and I, we've been married in a couple weeks, will be 45 years. The joke is, in early marriage, I had a tendency to blame her for everything. And then it got to be, once I realized it, then it became more comical. Because I'd say, look, I was out doing this today at work, and, somebody backed into my car, and I'm trying to figure out, Becky, exactly why you're responsible for this. It'll take me a few minutes, but I'll come up with something. But pointing out the absurdity helped me.
Sure.
Because I quit doing that to her, and I quit doing that to others. And some things just, somebody backs into you, it's just the way things are.
Right.
But it's not that God is trying to teach you a lesson. I love God protected me on the highway. If I'd been there 5 minutes earlier, I'd have been right in the middle of that accident. And first of all, take personal responsibility. I chose to be here at this time, not at that time. I don't think that God kills the guy in front of you instead of you because he loves you more than he loves the guy in front of you.
Sure.
I don't think that's good theology, and it's not a good understanding of who God is.
100%. I mean, there's no ability to correct if you don't take responsibility for your actions. So if you're constantly blaming other external circumstances for why you are the way that you are, the mistakes that you make, you won't see them as a mistake because of you. So therefore, there's no growth. You made this really amazing point this weekend. You're like, we taught our kids to brush their teeth and to clothe themselves and do all of these things, but we didn't teach them to blame their sibling. And Laura and I are working on that especially with our oldest one. Her favorite phrase right now, well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. We didn't teach her that. We're like working actively to pull that out of her and understand like it was your fault. Even if it was an accident, it was still your fault, and you have to deal with the consequences of that. And hopefully that will instill that personal responsibility in her, because we do think it's a very important trait to have.
I agree. And I think I like it when I self-correct.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it when others try to correct me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the best correction in life is being able to point it out to your daughter or my granddaughter and say, hey, is that the best you? Let's think about this in a different way. And maybe it's not just, for the third time I've told you and whatever,
right.
You're in timeout, but to allow them to come up with the reasons why they need to own it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it gets you in trouble, I think it's a problem too. But and let me segue a little bit into telling the truth. One of our values in our family is to be honest and tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But when you don't tell the truth, it's usually because you're afraid of the consequences of something that you've done.
Right.
Tell the truth, own it, take the traffic citation, take the, confess. And confession, I think, is part of personal responsibility. And even when I confess to others, hey, I'm so sorry. I was late. I did you wrong. I said something, and it came back to you, and it sounded like I was really criticizing you. I don't mean that. Forgive me first, and let me restate it in a way that's better. Or maybe I did just throw you under the bus, and I learned a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
I should not do that. It's not healthy for me. What you're saying that I said is true, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I'll try to do better in the future. But that's owning it.
Right.
And I said that about you because you're a dirty, rotten, person, and I stand by it because that's who you are. Well, I don't think it's my best version to try to others correct. I have enough issues with myself.
Right.
I need to deal with my heart and me, and where I can offer compassion, I think it's a lot better than correcting other people.
Yeah. A few weeks back when we spoke on physical health and spiritual health, you said, these disciplines are always better self-imposed.
Exactly.
If it's something that I can identify within myself and impose it as a new discipline, it's always for the best.
Right. And the term rules, I'm not a big fan of the word rules.
Right.
But I'm okay if I establish rules in my life. I just don't want others to establish rules for me that may or may not be just or fair. And sometimes that creates problems when laws are put on us that seem to be contrary to our freedom.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, I think that's an expansion. Do you have anything else since we've got this open-ended podcast any other more ideas on this?
Well, I'd love to tell people, if you're just listening to the podcast and you want to go back and watch the teachings, they're on our website or on YouTube. You can find those, and you can see where this expands to it. Or if this piques your interest and you want more, you can go there and find out a lot of other information.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Pastor.
All right. See you next time.
See you.